Hello there and a warm welcome to this edition of the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV, streaming on YouTube. My name is Judith Atim, and it is a pleasure to come to you once again this week. And we're discussing quite an interesting topic, which is the illegal military court trials of civilians. And we're asking if the judiciary is fighting hard enough. And with me are the usual guests. From my immediate left, of course, is Dr. Robert Ojambo, head of the History Department at Chambogo University. Good afternoon, Dr. Robert.
Good afternoon, Judith. I'm happy to be here.
Good to have you. Next to Dr. Ojambo is Miriam Kyomugasho, who is a Pan-Africanist. Miriam, good afternoon.
Hi, Judith.
You seem very happy.
I'm happy to see you, and I'm happy to be here as well.
That's very good. And I'm looking forward to, of course, hearing your thoughts on this discussion we're having. Last but not least is Mr. Joseph Ochieno, who is a political commentator. He's also a UPC ideologue. Joseph, happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be next to Miriam. She's a fantastic lady, fantastic friend, a Pan-Africanist like me. And of course, Dr. Ojambo might say that for omitted his name on Pan-Africanism, we all are. But I think the degree of emphasis is very important, and how we translate that into practice is a big issue. But yes, being here and discussing militarism after 40 years of NRA makes me sick, but I'm delighted to be here.
Well, thank you. So when we are talking about the illegal military court trials, just last week we had a similar conversation, but not looking at the military court. We were focusing on the militarization and abductions in the region. But of course, today also we are picking up more or less from where we stopped last time. And this conversation we're having is in light of recent developments that we are seeing, in particular, the prosecution of opposition politician Dr. Kizza Besigye and his colleague Haji Lutale. But before that, we saw NUP supporters and generally political dissidents or anyone who is of a contrary view to the establishment and critical of the establishment as that being politically persecuted and always ending up in the military court. And we know very well that the law is very clear that whatever the military court is doing, trying civilians in particular, after 2022 is an act of illegality. So I just want, before we go into the deeper discussion, I just want your quick thoughts about this. If I could start with you, Dr. Ojambo.
Yeah, you see, Judith, you need to understand the spirit of government of Uganda. Government of Uganda came to be out of a civil war, the Luwero War. And it seems these people carried their bush mannerism into government. You know, in the bush, for us who read and listen to people who were there, if you committed an offense, there was a committee, a committee that was set up. They would take you there, and by the time you appear for trial, your sentence has already been reached, ordered by the commander or somebody. They are just putting you there. In fact, what they used to do to put you in public is to show example. That if somebody does something like this is where we are going. You know, they used to put a soldier in sort of a drum, then you stand in it and you only appear half of your body, and from there you would be taken either to be shot or to be locked in an andach. Even my friend Tunyefunza spent a lot of days in an andach when they bury you down and they lock you there for some days. That was their prison. So when they came here, they found the judiciary, and you know our judiciary is established by Act of Parliament, the Judicial Act, but it's also embedded into our Constitution from Article 134, 137, 139 is what establishes the High Court and all the jurisdiction up to the lowest grade 2 magistrate court. The whole thing started when you remember when we had the Black Mambas. The Black Mambas, and it was because court was not finding the people who were being taken to the court during that time, especially bomb suspects and the APR and ADF suspects. They were taking them to court, and court would give them bail. Now, these people would be given bail. Immediately they are released. Some funny people would come and capture them, kidnap them and take them back, and they would be recharged. So one time it was too much, and the Black Mambas just went to court and picked them from there. And that's when the people who were picked from the courts were taken to the court martial in Machindi. So they started trying them there, and the justification was, justification was under Article 205, which is, no, in the year 2005, they established the court martial, and they gave it a semblance of a court of jurisdiction, that it also has lawyers and all those people. So they choreographed something, and before we knew it, it was in our books of law that it could also try people. Now there is a section that they say it is a court basically for soldiers, but there is a section that they said that so long as you do things which make you look like a soldier, for example, you are found with the military equipment or anything related to UPDF, you would be taken to that court. So that's the excuse they started using. And the first culprits were those suspects of ADF and the suspects who were put in after the bombing situation which was here. Now, has our court done so much? In my view, the court itself tried on the Black Mambas. The Black Mambas, you remember, at that time, Justice Ogola was so bad about it when he was the principal judge. He said, he even wrote a poem about it, the attack of the temple. And after that time, there have been a quarrel between the normal courts and
The civilian courts.
the civilian courts and the president. And their biggest issue has been that this court is releasing people on bail, even people who, according to him, are not supposed to be bailed. So the option now becomes the Machindi Dungeon Court, where they now take you and they can only release you on orders, as we shall see later. Either if you are to be released, they can release you. If you are not supposed to be released, you may even stay there for years and you are not tried. And you have seen so many people, even huge people like Kale Kaihura, Tinyefunza, Tumukunde, and others who have been in that situation. But those were soldiers, so I did not sympathize with them, because if those were soldiers, they were being handled. But now, this thing was worsened in 2021, when they were picking people from the campaign trails, from rallies, from their homes, and from any other place. And those who were lucky, and I'm using the word lucky in quotes, would find themselves in the court martial. Those who are lucky. Those who are not lucky, we have never heard about them up to today. They have disappeared. And we are crying the 18 Noob supporters. We have never heard where they are. We don't know whether they died. Those who are lucky have been there. Of course, when they took their Kabaziruka in 2022, Kabaziguruka. That interesting name for my brother. He challenged that matter, and we were lucky that the Court of Appeal, a bench of 5, went 3-2 and said that this court was illegal. That this court was illegal, and said it is not even a court, it is a committee, it's the disciplinary committee of the army, and it should only try army people, so civilians should go there. But Owinyindolo vetoed the whole thing. Owinyindolo, when the matter was taken to the Supreme Court, he they did not stay the ruling, but he said that that law cannot apply until the matter is heard. They did not stay. So that has created a quagmire. The matter has not been heard. There is no stay. But for me, I normally argue from my own wisdom that the ruling of the Court of Appeal stands. So in my mind, in my view, it is illegal. So you are right to call it an illegal court. But it's only illegal when it is trying civilians. If they take their men in uniform, because those ones have been taken through the systems and they know how those committees operate, those ones can be taken there. So I want to agree with you that they're illegal. The second part is that the court of the judiciary has not done much in that endeavor. In fact, the first attempt was that appeal case of
Kabaziguruka.
Of course, Mwenda had also challenged the certain things there. I have a view that we used to have a very strong litigation during Semogerere. I am very sure that if that group of Semogerere was still active and alive, something would have happened. These days, the opposition, they don't go so much to court, and therefore the court has not been given a chance to try these things. We just hope that the current situation of SJ will help us so that somebody maybe goes to the Constitutional Court again, somebody maybe goes to the Supreme Court or the High Court to challenge, because I saw what is happening at this court. It is pathetic. It is not a court.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ojambo. Miriam, I want you to weigh in on this, of course, using your Pan-African lens, and just share with me what you think about this illegality that we are seeing playing out and basically pushing civilians so much on the edge.
Yeah. Thank you, my colleague, Doctor. You've given a thorough background about the Kyomugasho and it's how NRM regime is using it for political reasons. If I can borrow from my history lessons, it's good you're a history professor. I know, all regimes, they become dictatorial. Actually, one of the signs that the regime is dictatorial is trying people through kangaroo courts and executing them, extrajudicial actions like trying civilians in such courts that are not describable, that are not thoroughly legal, in a way that they don't follow any laws, and the laws are made as you go along. And that's how I say the Ugandan Kyomugasho. It was there, I think, when they started it because of the terrorism, you would somehow think maybe they are justified because the terrorism was kind of out of, it was a new thing and it was catching people by surprise. So they were looking for firefighting to see how to really control that. Because somehow they thought terrorists couldn't be tried in the mainstream courts. They are not civilians, they are not full-fledged military people, but
they're in possession of...
Yes, they are not, they are rebels, so they behave like military, but are not in a real legal sense like they are military people. So that's how I think they come up with, like, if you are behaving like a military and you have the gun and you have this, maybe you can go through the Kyomugasho, we can try you as a soldier because you are committing the crimes as the same as someone who was armed and such. But I think the NRM regime used that gap again to use it for political purposes. They saw it was a loophole that we really let slip on us, and now it's being used as a weapon to fight people, whoever opposes the NRM regime. And that's why you find people who are now going into the Kyomugasho are not necessarily armed officials or terrorists being disciplined by the court. And I think it was rightly described as a disciplinary committee of the military establishment to internal disciplinary of its own members as per their profession, because they are trained not to do ABCD. If they do it, they know how the laws and their regulations act on them. So they are right to be tried in that side. But what about civilians? So, and it's common, I mean, whatever shows the intention of the regime is the people who we find in front of the Kyomugasho. every day there are so many gangs today in Uganda who are killing people. Like recently they are attacking mobile people, mobile agents, they are thieves attacking people and all that. But you don't see the military so active into looking for those dissidents and trying to rule in, to enforce the rule of law and reduce crime on the street. Instead, they are very active looking for politicians who are opposing the regime. NRM is very busy when it comes to cracking down opposition than in every other sector. That's the only sector where they are ever so active, where they are very effective, and they even come in when you don't expect them and when you don't need them. They are over available. And the people who are in front of court shows the intention of the regime. We have seen, Dr. mentioned the opposition NUP members who were arrested or kidnapped. I think the right word is kidnapped in 2021 elections, and some of them even up to recent, I think some of them are still in the courts. We see them being coerced. Some of them were never produced in any courts, and some were even coerced to have, fake confessions, to confess for crimes they didn't commit, so that they can even be bailed. So if it's a real court, we know how real courts work. If it's a real court, they put you in, they arrest you legally, they read the case for you, they allow you access to your lawyers and your families, and you are presented in court and defend your case. If you are guilty, you are committed to prison in illegally provided correction centers or prisons, not in safe houses or dungeons somewhere where people, some of them die, some of them come out when they are maimed, like we saw how Kakwenza was beaten almost to death. Some of the people, we don't know who dies there because they kidnap people, they don't even allow them access to people. So we don't know who is there. Maybe even people who disappear die and they throw them away or just bury them somewhere because that place is so dark. If the court martial was illegal, what does it operate in the dark? They kidnap, they don't allow access to the lawyers, they don't do anything in the open. Even if it was military, it should be straightforward. It should be according to the book. The law is clear, ABCD, we are doing this according to the law. So even if the court martial was legal and constitutional, which it's not, it's still operating like a kangaroo court. Even it's breaking its own laws. That's the court martial today in Uganda. And I think it shouldn't be here, and it's a bad sign of our time. And if it continues like this, kidnapping people and just presenting them and maybe judging them for whatever cases they just pick from anywhere and try to dump on the people, then we don't have a good future as our first democracy is concerned.
Thank you, Miriam. Joseph, let me hear your quick thoughts.
This is a military regime. There is that adage that guys normally talk about the duck that sings like a duck, walks like a duck, dances like a duck,
It probably
talks
is.
Mabati like a duck. So
Probably is.
So if you find, its finance minister talks like a duck, that's really duck. No, this is a military regime. Uganda has been under military dictatorship from July 27th, 1985. In January 1986, the military groups split. NRA sprang and took supreme, took action, because some of them were lucky not to have gone through the contemporary kind of UPE, but they went through decent education. Some of them pretended to be very clever. Sometimes I wonder. And so some of them even presented themselves as reasonably intellectuals. And so they went out on a mission to try and create a semblance of order, civility, and even seek, if you like, functional, legitimacy from a democratic perspective. So therefore, present themselves as democrats. It was a desperate thing that took us to the formation of that obnoxious thing, NRC, That got me into trouble with Makerere when they wanted to bring the resistance councils at campus. I'm among the students who said no, and that's how I ended up in exile. They went through that, and the NRC moved on. They came with the SCA thing to push for a new constitutional order, and that led us to 1995, NRA constitution, and fast forward, 2005, we had return to multipartyism. We can call it pluralist in the terms. But if you look from then to today, nothing has effectively changed. But why I start like that is, you imagine that this bunch of fascists, in many cases, some of them went to Luwero bushes claiming that they're seeking to fight for rule of law, law and order, democracy, accountability, returning power to the people, constitutionalism. And constitutionalism, I say it so because it's even presented as if before the NRA constitution of 1995 that Uganda had no constitution. No, we had an independence constitution which had no problem at all, except the contradictions that led to us to the 1966 crisis. The 1966 crisis was resolved politically. Granted, there was a confrontation between central government and Buganda Kingdom. This was settled through the 1967 Republican Constitution. From 1967, notwithstanding the grievances of monarchists in Buganda, and indeed by and large monarchists elsewhere, monarchists, Uganda particularly, and other monarchists, there was national consensus about the Republican state of the Republic of Uganda. And so anything that would happen, including anybody in 1969 or 70, who would carry firearms against the former provisions, there would be systems and provisions in the penal code to deal with such a person. And so therefore, if an average Ugandan found themselves into Kenya in 1970, December, did something, funding Kenya or Tanzania, there would be organized, legal, systematic provisions to deal with them in those nation states. In any case, we're very robust East African community at the time. But in the event that perhaps they extradited formally, legally into Uganda, there would be provision, and they would not end up in a military tribunal. So what I'm saying is that no, NRA is one of the biggest fraud this country has had, one of the biggest fraud this sub-region has had, and one of the biggest fraud this continent has had. And so really, is it a chicken coming to roost? No, these guys are basically locked up. If you see why I talk about the dark thing, you touch Museveni at a particular angle, then you see how the guy behaves. He gets in a particular court order, then he remembers that where is this military combat fatigue to come and show you power. So, you guys, there is absolutely no reason why Kizza Besigye should have found himself in Machinde. We've said it on this program, but we're contextualizing. I am saying, and we said it on this platform again, that look, in the event, unlikely event, in any event, because we don't know that Kizza Besigye committed an offense of a particular nature in Kenya. He was, a guest of the Kenyan jurisdiction. That needed to have been sorted out there, and not to be illegally, criminally kidnapped. The manner worse than what Amin would do, lest we forget. So this regime, their friends are Idi Amin, their friends are Idi Amin's friends, and their friends are imperialist forces that are independent, so to push aside. So you can see how bad we are, the state we are. So that is that. And then bring Besigye back home. Taking him to that, I know my colleagues were giving deep depth in terms of context. No, the truth is, the court martial is a disciplinary forum for serving military officers. And like I think my other good friend, who is a former soldier and former CIA member says that, look, it is really a place to resolve a dispute between a commander and a junior officer. And in many cases, it would be the complainant would be the commander that a junior officer has misbehaved and things that instead of taking him or her to the quarter guard and whip them, take them to that because of the nature of that's really, it has got no place. And after 60 years of our independence, and after 40 years of this bunch of guys who came criminally, by the way, no, they should not subject Ugandan citizens to the nonsense and mess in which they have done at Machindi. Now, did you say the judiciary is not trying enough? Dr. Ojambo and I think my friend Miriam has said that, I think, there has been a ruling that, very clearly the courts pronounce themselves on. The matter remains, I think, for the Supreme Court to basically take a definitive position, but to all intents and purposes, how much money does the judiciary need to be given? To buy fuel? What kind of fuel? Is that fuel for aircrafts? To take them to a sitting in which they would sit and resolve and take away this nonsense about the illegality of a court-martial? But I said, so in other words, it's not that the judiciary is not doing enough. It's doing nothing. My opinion is the judiciary is not doing nothing. It is through omission and commission, and through that simply because this is a matter that serves the interests of the commander-in-chief, and orders from above directs that the status quo remains. So really and unfortunately, the judiciary is as much on trial as it is this regime, as it is actually the Legislative Assembly, Parliament. I would have expected Parliament to have been recalled and to have a special session on this. And in any case, to an extent also, those of us in the democratic political opposition, that I think we also have not been cohesive enough together to rally around this simply because Kizza Besigye is basically one of us, regardless of whatever difference of opinion we might be having with him. Yeah.
Well, thank you. So when Besigye was in the military court last week, together with his colleague Haji, his lawyer, one of his lawyers, Aaron Kizza, actually posted this on his Twitter handle. He was basically giving a summary of that constitutional court ruling that declared the military tribunal illegal. So I'm just going to read briefly. So he said the General Court Martial, which is a military tribunal and not a court of judicature, is by pretending to try civilians, Kizza Besigye and Haji Lutale Obeid, acting in contempt of court orders of the Constitutional Court of Uganda. So he's referring to a majority judgment made on 15th December 2022, a case that was brought by retired Captain Amon Byarugaba and others versus the Attorney General. And the court at that time declared that the exercise of jurisdiction by the military courts to try civilians for criminal offenses is unconstitutional. That's just briefly one part of it. Secondly, the UPDF Act 2005, to the extent that it may be understood as conferring jurisdiction on military courts to try civilians, is unconstitutional and therefore null and void to that extent. Part C says criminal cases in which civilians have been charged before the military courts but are pending trial or have been partly tried should immediately be transferred to a competent civilian court of judicature and taken over by the Director of Public Prosecutions. And the last part says the convictions and sentences of civilians which arose from criminal cases tried by military courts prior to the date of this judgment, which was 15th December 2022, are valid. Therefore, anything that comes after that, any decision that may be taken at such trials to convict and or sentence civilians shall, from the date of this judgment, that's 2022, be invalid and null and void ab initio. Now, when we are looking at whether or not the judiciary is pushing hard enough, to the extent, I'd say to a degree, perhaps you would say they have tried. I mean, the fact that they came up with this judgment and this declaration to an extent means they are. But on the other hand, one wonders when you look at the silence from the judiciary when these kinds of things are happening.
That's the point.
Yes. is it fair enough for society to conclude that perhaps the judiciary is complicit in abetting these kinds of illegalities against the Ugandan population?
I will re-emphasize. That is simply what I said. That it is not that they're not trying, they're not. In any case, the rulings that they came up with, which were rather impressive and quite clear and quite definitive, it is granted. In any case, that's their job. They're not doing us any favor. They're lawyers, they're paid for, and we pay them to do those jobs. And in fact, by the way, these guys grow, just like people grow in academia. By you saying that I did a master's program and my level of critical analysis was ABCD, and I made this and compounded this and came up with something fresh and exciting, and that's why I'm a doctor. So no, in terms of precedent, that's their job, to be able to test and critique, and put the law on taste. And they did that. So not doing us a favor, they did their job they're supposed to do. So since then, 2 years later, what's going on? Where's the Attorney General? Where's the Solicitor General? Where's the Minister for Justice? Where are they? Where the entire bunch? And I said, where is Mr. Museveni? This bunch, this guy who subjected Ugandans to criminal banditry in Luwero. What was he doing there in Luwero? And now 40 years. And I said, what is it that he needs after 20 years in order to translate that into a reality? This is not about Obeid. This is not about Kizza Besigye. Actually, the fact that these things hang there mean a possibility of, say, a young boy in Ntinda getting desperate for Christmas and wants to impress his girlfriend with the ring, and then thinks that, let me go and steal a mobile phone, and then accidentally hands himself many pieces. Those kind of subjective, and absolutely wrong. Absolutely wrong. Now, I am tempted to say that this thing is happening because of the perfect system. But yeah, there's a point that I was going to miss, which is very interesting. Somebody has actually cynically argued that maybe there is a game, and that's why poor Dr. Besigye, it was even suggested that maybe there's some game which is going on here. On the basis of the last provisions, it is saying that taking Kizza Besigye down there with the fantastic legal team that they actually do have, it's actually possible that even in the very unlikely event that Kizza Besigye had committed a criminal offense, an offense of the magnitude that being applied, the possibility of Kizza Besigye, and I'm not playing prejudicial arguments here, it could easily end up that Kizza Besigye walks out clean-free, because, as has already been suggested, that the trials post 2022 should be null and void. I should not apply. So then, I don't know who. So you rearrest Besigye and then go ahead and retry him on a similar case? What do they call it in law?
Probably just to put these matters in perspective, basing on the reading you made and the question you have asked. 3 things. One, I want to argue that yes, the judiciary has a duty to play in this matter, because this matter is before the Supreme Court, and it's now 3 years. And the people have been complaining, to be specific, about the Chief Justice, Owinndolo. In fact, he sat as an individual. He did not create a bench. He sat as the president of the court, or the leader of the Supreme Court, and is the one, as an individual, who stayed the law being applicable. Because that one is a fact, is on record that he stayed it. In under normal circumstances, the Supreme Court was supposed to sit and either stay or leave the thing to go. But he wrote, and he checked, the Constitution gives him those powers. But also, we need to guard against the judiciary. The judiciary cannot go looking for cases so that it can rule over them. For those who have been in the law school, they normally give that example of the Mombasa judge. But the Mombasa judge was this zealous judge who saw somebody committing an offense and ordered for his arrest and wanted to be a witness and at the same time be the
judge and jury.
And so they normally tell judicial officers not to behave like the Mombasa judge. whether you know that something is bad, you can only make talk about it when it is before you at the bench. I have heard the judiciary in meetings when they are celebrating, they mention these cases. I have seen their speeches. They mention things that really perturb them, and one of them is this military court. And the other one is rearresting. Rearresting of the people who have
After
been
bail.
released
So-
On bail, yes.
In fact, the other one, which was really disturbing them, and this one want to thank Winnie Ndolo, he ruled. He ruled on it and ordered all the courts that if any suspect is brought before you and there is evidence that he was tortured wherever he has been brought about, you are not supposed to try that person until they take him to hospital and explain circumstances that put him in the state where he is. And I've seen many courts, even recently in Masaka, the High Court rejected the witness because the witness said, I had been beaten and forced to say this, and he had signs, and they dismissed that witness. So the judiciary has done some work, but the biggest problem is also our citizenry. Because the courts are not going to rule on something. I've been waiting to see petitions.
Yeah.
There must be petitions in court. These courts should now be full of petitions. There should be a petition in High Court, in Nakawa. There should be the jurisdiction of Makindi itself. There is a High Court there, and many other places. We should have seen petitions so that we make these high courts busy to interpret this matter.
Yeah.
But as we wait for the Supreme Court, it does not stop. It does not stop somebody also to challenge. For example, if the Court of Appeal, I've been asking myself, I'm not a lawyer, layman, I've been asking myself, if the Court of Appeal ruled and there is no stay, should the case in the Supreme Court lock up everything and move as if it is normal? So we would need some interpretation,
That's
and the only
correct.
people who can do interpretation is
the
court.
court.
Is
The
court.
same court,
So
yeah.
we are. That's why me I liked my elder Semogerere. On such things he used to run to court, whether he loses or either they apply, but there would be a judgment.
Yeah.
There would be a judgment, and it improved the jurisprudence in this country. But these days, I think people have lost hope in courts because you know that some rulings have been made and the army have overruled them. For example, I've been asking myself, this country is degenerating into a military state. Quiet land, people are keeping quiet. The appointment of serving officers in public offices, there are now, several of them are ministers, permanent secretaries. Now if you go to Ministry of Agriculture, you go to Ministry of Internal Affairs, they are serving officers, they even sit there with uniform and they are nyotas, and therefore you have to go and salute Jambo sir. And this is a public servant. Somebody will ask me, are people not servants? They are military officers, and their job is very clear, to protect and give us defense. Now they have come to take up public service job, and we are keeping quiet. General Katumba is a minister. General Ronda died when he was a serving officer and a minister of foreign affairs, internal affairs, and many others. We have J.J. Odong, he has not yet retired. David Muhozi, and David Muhozi has a master's degree in law. And he's also there masquerading that he's a minister when he knows very well he's a general.
But Aronda,
Now,
but Aronda had a master's degree in law.
Yeah, we don't want to speak about Aronda.
Dead.
He has no power to defend himself.
But what about Mohozi?
Muhozi is alive.
Yeah,
here.
you can talk.
He's alive.
Oh no, sorry, not Aronda. No, I beg your pardon. No, what's this guy?
Kaihura.
Kaihura. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Leave Kaihura alone. Kaihura,
Sorry,
if
sorry.
there are people who messed up things, here is one of them. So we don't want to even discuss him. So my view is that as you talk about the courts, have you seen that the army is entering into the civil service elsewhere?
A lot of space.
The Operation Wealth Creation now is led by a military officer. They are the ones teaching people how to grow coffee and the banana and what have you. I don't know whether in the military they teach them agriculture. I don't know. Now, come to the military court martial. nobody would have a problem with the military court martial. But very many of us who are observing things happen there, and I've always told people that for me, if I'm taken to the court martial, I'll remain silent. I'll remain silent so that they sentence me without defense. Because it does not have any procedure of a court. The bench itself. I was just looking at the qualifications of General Mugume. The only qualification he has is military training from 1986.
What?
In 1986, he joined NRA. Then he was taken to military, various military places. So he's a qualified military officer. In matters of law, zero. Look at the others. Look at what they use. They use regulations. They use regulations. I saw the other day when Kiza was arguing with one of the lawyers. The man was referring to regulations. The lawyer was referring to the Constitution. And the man does not know that the Constitution is superior regulations. The other problem in that court, we have a penal code. And for those who are worried that there is no case in Uganda which cannot be tried under our penal code, including Ongwen. You have seen Ongwen and his colleagues are being tried in the High Court, basing on the penal code. And these are rebels who killed people and did everything. So every case here can be tried in the courts of jurisdiction because the penal code has everything. These people, they don't depend on the penal code. They depend on UPDF regulations. They say regulation number this, regulation number that. Now, if I am not a UPDF person, how am I bound to your regulations? Those guys have taken an oath against those regulations. For me, I have not. I have always argued. They say, but if you put on a beret or you have something, a shoe that looks like face soldier, you then have property which look like for UPDF. And I've asked them. Many in Kampala here, especially in Kampala, I have seen people sleep in garages. Garages of vehicles. Do they become vehicles? Do we take them to take fuel that they have become shoes? Vehicles. No, they are not vehicles. So I can put on, like for example, this is shambolic argument of the beret of Noob.
Yeah.
It was very clear, and that's why I've seen nobody has arrested Bobby Wine and his top bosses because they know they cannot sustain that thing. Because that thing is not UPDF. The one of UPDF has the emblem, has other things.
The insignia is clear. Yeah.
When you see it, you really know that this is UPDF. This is UPDF. These camouflage uniforms, some people were taken to court because they were putting on camouflage uniforms.
They can still be tried in
those camouflage uniforms are just clothes. Unless if somebody uses it to rob. Then when he uses it to rob, you are charged of robbery.
Yeah.
Not because you are putting on a camouflage uniform. In the penal code, you are charged of robbery. Even in the penal code, having military equipment. I remember long ago when I was still a young man, one of our neighbors was taken to police because he had uniform. This one had real army uniform. And was taken to a local court and sentenced because he had property. So for me, I feel, I looked at that court. You look at how it operates. A court is supposed to be a public place which can be accessed by anyone because everybody should see what is happening.
Then why do you call it a court? Say that thing for that tribunal. It's not a court.
It's not a court.
You know, it is illegal. Let's obey the law. It is that thing is illegal to try
Good.
civilians.
Good.
But it is a court.
No,
Yes,
it's a tribunal. It's a military thing which we don't know. No, they know. Me, I don't know.
Tribunal. Now you look at that Machindie tribunal. That Machindie tribunal, to enter it, you have to get permission of the officers there.
Yeah.
They check you, they do what, they say you enter, you don't enter. Then it denies people fair hearing. Because you are denying, it's like a closed hearing. Number two, look at those guys, how they are dressed. Just imagine you go to tribunal and people are dressed in military uniform. Military uniform.
You.
And they intimidate you. So how do I bring, for example, if I am Besige and I want to bring my witnesses to argue against the state, and I am going there, how sure are you that that witness may go back home?
But then, Judith, this is actually a very interesting point. I thought about this several times before, but I think this is the most important time to mention it. Robert, you know, actually the fairest about that, even if it was actually in that situation in which it is merely a tribunal for soldiers, really, actually, they should actually find a decent, much more neutral attire. So that this poor young soldier who has come here, who maybe the other day, you know, maybe abused or delayed to return home, or maybe broke a vehicle or something like that is being brought to this thing, you know, comes to face human being rather than another place in the place of
an
combat.
intimidating
So actually,
environment.
psychologically that. In possibly then the unlikely event that, okay, they argue that soldiers are soldiers, and so therefore you want to go down there and face officers and command structure and systems like that. That's fair enough. In this case, then I hope then the person being brought to
Before
trial
that court, yes.
should also dress in a formal system. That's a military
No, if
thing.
he is a military officer, that's what
But
happens.
that's my point. So then immediately then you are trying somebody who's a former serving officer or anybody else, even if it was something to be justified, because we still reject it should not be a place for people. Those guys should not be putting on a uniform. Those guys should not be putting on
Now,
army
Mr.
uniforms.
Ochieno, you know, viewers may think that court martials are only in Uganda. Court martials are adopted from the British system. In the UK, there is a court martial for a military court martial.
Yes, yes.
But that military court martial, what surprises you, and which we should adopt here if they want us to respect it as a court, they make sure that the people serving there are judicial officers.
Precisely.
Yeah, that's
The boss of it, even in the UK, is supposed to be a colonel, at a rank of a colonel,
and above.
but should be a judicial officer.
Yeah.
And all the staff should be serving judicial officers. And when they are appointed to that court, they now leave the military things.
That's correct.
They leave the military things and concentrate on the law,
Yeah.
so that they are fair. Because if a general has brought Ojambo, Private Ojambo, and this general is my boss, it is difficult for me to make a fair judgment against this person.
Yeah.
Because in army, if I'm a serving officer, a general says something, I'm not supposed to say no. So these people are relieved from their military offices, and now they become judicial officers, but dealing with matters of military men and women.
Seeking what? Ensuring due
Justice.
process.
So the military court martial in Uganda here, you have seen the chairman who was there. There was General Eli Tumwine, there was Guti, and so on. And you don't see any one of them who is from even a legal background. And yet in the military, there is a special recruitment where they recruit lawyers. Why don't they make sure that everybody who is posted in these military court martials, from the top in, if the Machindia one looks ugly like this, what about the field one in Palabek or in Kitugu? It must be very dangerous.
And you know.
Sorry.
So in my view, I think sometimes in Uganda we have a very big problem. We like doing wrong things and justifying them, and that's why I want to agree with what she said. This court martial is not put in place to promote justice. It is put in place to promote interests of the government and therefore the leadership that is there. Because if Mugume is told not to release somebody, can he? He cannot, because he's still a serving soldier.
Thank you.
So in my view, that's what
Yes.
I want to come in on that point. And you know, the court martial being under UPDF, and UPDF is under the direct charge of the commanding officer, the commander-in-chief, who is the president. So if you disagree, if it's not like, it's not under the judicial. So under separation of powers, where does it fall? Does it fall under the executive, or it falls under the judicial? So to be a real court, it should be under the judiciary. But being a UPDF entity, it's under the executive and under the president himself, who is the commander-in-chief. So it's now like the president is trying civilians for whatever reasons he thinks, and it's his prerogative or discretion. He can do anything to them because he's the commander-in-chief of the court, and he himself is not part of the judiciary. So I think I also, not to repeat what they said, what my colleagues said, I think the civil society, the other powers, the legislature, the political parties, and even the academia, you are also included in that. Everybody of us, we are not doing enough to challenge this anomaly. I mean, it's not normal to have this quota within us, and we can't pretend that it's dispensing justice, because it's not, and we all know that. And I don't know whether the judges are allowed to do advocacy away from the courts, because we might blame them that the judiciary is not doing enough. I don't know how much they are supposed to do, not to break the laws and their rules of regulations. Like, can a judge come out and say, I don't agree with ABCD? No. I think they decide on the things we put in front of them. So if we don't put petitions on their table, if we don't appeal to them, if we don't challenge their rulings and all that, how do we expect them to act on such matters? And secondly, I think the judiciary, by extension, also involves the lawyers, the practicing lawyers, and the law society, and all other entities who are not the practicing judges and whatever, but are part of the legal entity, the legal fraternity. And those people can come out, private lawyers, anybody can come out and challenge this thing. I mean, the more we increase the voices, the more we bring out to the, like he's citing out to the issues which are really not at par. Even the military officers deserve justice. So if you present a private person to a commander who doesn't know anything about the law, he's just a commander of the force, he's a military person, but he's not a lawyer, he's not a trained judge. How do we expect such a person, the young private officer or whatever, the junior person presented in such a court, to get justice from those people who don't know nothing about the law? So, and they are also human. So human rights advocates should also be advocating for military officers in such a court, even though it's there for the disciplinary function of the army. It should also be composed in a legal way, in a legal, a legal professional way, so that it can be able to interpret the law according to the books and how it should be, not just by their wishes and interests as they serve, or the powers they serve. So I think we as Ugandans, we have betrayed ourselves as far as this court-martial thing is concerned. I mean, the regime can get away with whatever they get away if we don't challenge them, and it's our duty to do so.
You know, just to give information to the public, in 2005, immediately that act, that UPDF Act was passed, the Uganda Law Society petitioned the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal ruled that trying civilians in that court was illegal. You can also go and check that one. In 2005.
Thank you. So let's, of course, we are looking at how far or how hard our judiciary is actually pushing to exert itself and reclaim its space as its rightful place in administering justice for civilians. Just the quick functions of our judiciary: protecting human rights, safeguarding the Constitution, promoting the rule of law, administering justice, interpreting the law, delivering justice, and so on. Robert, you talked about the militarization of our public service. And it is something that everyone sees, that's a fact. Joseph, you agreed that the judiciary, to a degree, is complicit in actually aiding and abetting these illegalities against Ugandan citizens. I want us to look at, of course, the issue of state capture reflected through these kinds of militarizations of our public service and other agencies. I also want to talk about the political interference that we see, again, not just in the judiciary, but cutting across the different sectors. When you have judicial officers delaying to be appointed to critical positions or appointed in acting capacity, and so on and so forth. To what extent? Certainly it has implications as well when it comes to the judiciary dispensing justice and generally delivering on its mandate. Do you think these situations that we are seeing, the state capture, the militarization, the politicization of positions, do you think it perhaps creates fear as well among serving judicial officers? And does this as well hinder them from exerting their authority as judicial officers?
In Uganda, when you look at the whole spectrum of sectors, there is no sector that is running very well. In fact, the only thing we normally say that maybe the Ministry of Defense, but because their information is locked, it's just like Libya when it used to be under Gaddafi. They used to tell us that it was a fantastic country. But because the media had been locked, you would only hear Gaddafi's voice. But when the springs came, it exposed everything. So when you look at the judiciary in Uganda is just like other sectors that are really affected. In Uganda, when you look at the health sector, you look at the education sector, you look at all sectors in the country. The only sector that is safe is the presidency. That one is safe. If the presidency wants money, it will be approved in just overnight. But the judiciary, look at our courts. We have never had a full bench at the Supreme Court. We have never. We are supposed to have a full bench of 10 plus the Chief Justice 11. We have never. We have never had a full bench at the Court of Appeal or the Constitutional Court. They're supposed to be 7, but in most cases they are 5 now that the others have even run away. In fact, Kisache was at the Supreme Court. He has run away. They were not. The high courts. Do you know that high court judges these days don't have proper jurisdiction? One high court of this judge of this place is taken to do backlogs in Igulu. Then he finishes, he goes to. So there is even no systematic. It is worse at the lower courts because that's where there are majority issues. The Magistrate Court 2 and Magistrate Court 1. In fact, if you want problems, you go to those places. Because there, even the prosecutor in most cases is not there. They call him state or her state. State is a big person. For her to come so that your file is said if the matter is criminal, it is a difficult thing. So the judiciary, like all other sectors, is understaffed. Then recently there was something that happened. When we were coming to the Constitutional Court, the one of Amama Mbabazi, there is something that happened in the judiciary. The judiciary was taken into a talk by the president, and they ballooned the salaries of judicial officers, gave them free amenities that they now, when they retire with their privileges. So you can imagine, these people, will they remain really good people? Recently, they now even have their own code in the budget. They are no longer budgeting under the Ministry of Justice. So there has been a way to try and lure the judiciary to feel good. For example, there is now a big struggle between the mainstream judiciary and the Director of Public Prosecutions, where we have these state attorneys. When you look at the money that the state attorney gets and the money that an officer of the judiciary gets, it is opposite. They did the same law 5 years. they have in the same universities, but you find the other one has a better salary. You travel in cases where you are going to try criminal cases. You travel with the state attorneys in the bus. The suspect and the state
prosecutor
attorney are in the same bus going to Gulu. So it compromises everything. Then the last thing is, court sometimes I've seen they make pronouncements, but to enforce those pronouncements, it is the Uganda police, the Uganda police and Uganda prison, because Uganda prison, its job is just to keep suspects and convicts. Then Uganda police is to effect, if it is arrest, if it is production, if it is investigation. They are the ones who do investigation under the CID and that office of the director. So you find that the system itself has a problem, in my view. And therefore, when you are dealing with a complicated matter like this court-martial thing, sometimes they don't want even to go there. They fear. For example, there is also now cadre judges. I am not going to be shocked very soon when a general, a military general or colonel or what is appointed a judge and he goes to court in uniform. I will not be shocked, because the government wants cadre judges. And I will not mention their names. You have seen people who have made outrageous judgments. So I want to agree with you that the judiciary is in challenge, but I don't want to blame the judiciary alone. The same is in health, the same is in education, the same is in all
Disaster
sectors.
preparedness.
It is only the office of the president that I think that is safe. Maybe if the judiciary is attached to the office of the president so that he can influence it properly.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's time for us to take a break, and then we'll return and continue with this discussion. Of course, we are looking at the illegal military court trials of civilians, and we're asking whether the judiciary is fighting hard enough. This is the Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back, and thank you for keeping it here with us on the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim once again, welcoming you to the second hour of this conversation. We're still continuing with our discussion on the illegal military court trials of civilians, and we're asking, is the judiciary fighting hard enough? My guests once again are Dr. Robert Ojambo, Miriam Kyomugasho, and Joseph Ochieno. Before we went into the break, Robert, I think you had already finished your submission, and I want to hear from Miriam. Of course, we were still talking about state capture, political interference, and its broader implications for the judiciary when it comes to doing their, delivering on their mandate, including the dispensation of justice and so on. Just what are your thoughts when there's a lot of this cloud of fear that our judiciary operates under, from the highest echelons of the sector to, of course, the lower levels? What broader implications does this have?
My colleague talked about the fear, the state interference, then the cadre judges, and I want to start from there. I think there is a compromise of institutions, like there is no separation of powers. The judiciary should be independent from the executive and the legislature as well. But the way we appoint our judges today compromises their positions, because it's the executive appointing them, and then the whole arm of executive again follows them into the parliament, where they are going to be vetted, and we know the dominating power is the NRM party there in the parliament. So the person, whoever is vetted by the regime, the government, the ruling government, is the one who's going to pass through the vetting. So that chain goes through, and if you were picked because of your allegiance to the party, of course, when you go on the bench, you are going to serve the party instead of serving the people or the law that you really profess. So that compromise of power has made it really, the judiciary has now been submerged by the executive, and we don't see the separation of powers. We don't see them being independent from the executive. So it's like the executive is now controlling the judiciary, and we don't even know where to draw the line. I think we can borrow from, say, the Kenyans, where the judiciary is public vetted, so that you know is publicly vetted, and if you have issues, people point out and say, oh, you are not fit enough, or you are fit enough to serve in that position. And if you are brought in by the public, you know that power belongs to those people who really put you in that seat, and you will endeavor to serve their interests first before serving the executive or another person who might be coercing you. So that's something maybe when we, in our constitution, that really is a mistake that was made. Not to separate exactly the judiciary and the executive, and the executive, the NRM regime has taken over up that, has exploited that gap to its advantage and the disadvantage of the justice system and the law in Uganda and the people. So you highlighted the roles of the judiciary, like upholding the law, human rights, and all that. I don't know to what extent they are really doing that today.
Interesting. Joseph, you want to chip in and add something? I say you're reflecting a lot.
I've been listening to my colleagues. They've really said all on this, except that I think it is still an error to suggest that somehow in 1986, we came in some big democracy with a bang, and that from then on we've been struggling, coming down. And that possibly from 1986 we came in, and then in 1995 an NRA constitution came, and we're at the peak of constitutionalism, and we calmed down. No, my suggestion is that we've had a military state, a police state, since 1986. And in fact, what has happened is a consolidation to the extent that now we are basically merely almost suddenly lamenting. For example, one of the rather persuasive things that nearly pushed Ugandans towards Mr. Museveni was this thing about the promulgation of the 1995 NRA Constitution. And many of the members of that Constitutional Assembly, CA, continue to take it very personally, and in many cases they take it as part of their CVs and epitaph to be put on the gravesites when they retire, to follow Milton Obote, the founding president, father. But no, I say that that constitution was basically a path used to legitimize, to legalize an illegality under a regime that did not have mandate or really any founding grounds to fight the battles that they fought from 1981, particularly in Luwero bushes, and that when they came to power, including their funny so-called 10-point program, where part of it is also inclusive of things to do with constitutionalism. And if you look through their NRA 10-point program, and then you ask which one to tick, Ochieno, all the time I always ask you, some of you guys ask me on this kind of programs, and I say that, well, I cannot give one to any of the 10, because all of them are falsehoods. I am saying that 1995 NRA Constitution, lest we forget, because part of it is also about linkages with democracy, is that Museveni openly with all his commanders and all of these people who funnily thought Museveni was a messiah, decided to put Article 269 in the 1995 Constitution, banning political parties. You know, that did not only mean that parties were arrested, but for 20 years, parties were basically dead. So children of political parties like myself are just lucky if some of our children want to relate with us. For me, thankfully, I was relatively young enough. That's why I'm still sort of around in this area. Now, from 2005, you can see, starting with the court-martial that Robert talks about, we've had 20 years of struggle. So really, Museveni has been consolidating this thing. And I remember my other good friend, Charles from Ochieno, saying Thursday, the day before yesterday, that for them they pushed the 1995 Constitution and gave Museveni all the powers. And at the time they thought Museveni was genuinely well-meaning. Miriam Matembe sometimes also says so, that they thought they were giving Mr. Museveni all the powers that he needed in order to consolidate and then to give us some kind of mini miracle. The irony is that I actually don't know what these guys were thinking that Mr. Museveni was doing or ought to have done, that the previous democratic elected government could not do. And unfortunately, for me who has to defend that, it was only the previous government was Obote 1 and Obote 2. And I really can't imagine some of these conversations here. Look, just very quickly, the biggest contestation about the Obote 2 government was the general elections of 1982, 1980, and very specifically the Paul Mwanga pronouncement as the chairman of the military commission. It was not actually even the president because we had a three-tier presidency. And for Mwanga basically to make a pronouncement that nobody should release the results except having been cleared by him. That tainted the system so much, and we fought and campaigned around it. We fought around it so much. And when you look into it, other than basically safeguarding, quote, this constitution and the state as it were, considering what it was at the moment, time, it has been used thus far. But can you imagine the things that my colleagues are talking about? That today, the person who appoints the chairman of the Electoral Commission, the person who says appoints the chair of the Judicial Commission, the person who appoints the judges, the person who appoints the Inspector General, the Inspector General of Police, the Human Rights Commission, the prisons chief. So sometimes when I look through the thing as my colleagues were talking, I said, look, you guys, what a joke. So sometimes I say, and that's why I'm delighted always to be here, Judith. And by the way, you're a fantastic presenter. Every time I'm flanked by you, I just see energy wanting to come, meaning here positivity. Why? Because your program, what it does, particularly to the young Ugandan audience here, and of course the global audience these days, we're powerful, we're global, is absolutely fantastic. I wonder, do we just get a whole day every week, or perhaps 2 days every week? Because there is so much to discuss about this republic. And maybe I'm now taking it to you to a slight disclaimer. Miriam, last week I was in Ojambo, West Nile. Extremely poor people struggling, and I see hopelessness and helplessness. Go to the other corner of Achule, poor, go to the other kind of Karamoja, poor, of course they do. Go to the other kind of Teso, poor. And just a few days ago, I was in my Tororo, poor. And then, of course, the other day I was just coming from this. I even passed via Bulisa in Bunyoro without prejudice. Poor. And I say, Ugandans, what exactly is going on? And we have these people. So basically what we are discussing is a perfection of a system that has been narrowed down from a group of individuals to now a man, his family, and a bit of a core followers using basically low constitutionalism, Ugandan flag, nationhood and state to basically run with it. So my view is that as we even chat about these things, you sometimes invoke some scholarly element inside me. And then I say, that's just energy. Where does it go? Because sometimes, by the way, you guys, I write. Me have good clips. And by the way, in my library, just by the by actually, in my library, in my private library in London, I have notebooks from like up to the ceiling and back. These are for 30 something years, and then sometimes when I go back, so recently I was away and I looked through Miriam, just 3 of them, and they said, these are the things I know, some of these things that I've forgotten, these are things I've gone through. Of course, this is some of the other things. This was 1992, this is 1993. It's a huge kind of stuff. But why I invoke that, I look back and sometimes I'm extremely helpless. Sometimes it's extremely painful. Sometimes it's actually what I know. But Judith, not to bore you, part of my biggest concern is sometimes I feel odd. And yet what I know is knowingly the truth. And you know what? It is terribly a negative reality as far as our futures are concerned. So what is it that I can do? What is it that we can do enough sufficiently to engage Ugandans in a constructive national conversation which is not partisan, a constructive national conversation which is not selfish, a constructive national conversation in which we bring up issues, but people don't see it as pointing fingers. But that whatever then we do, including pointing fingers, because we have to point some fingers because some criminals exist in this country, because they've broken this country criminally. But at some stage, what is it that we can do to have a genuine national conversation to take this thing forward? Because if it's not that, this conversation is basically just, okay,
a conversation,
steam
yes.
off, and then tomorrow is business as usual. And poor Uganda suffering in Luzira and in Machinde. And to conclude, it is also what I heard from Charles Promotion on Wednesday. You know, actually I didn't know Dr. Ojambo because I was forgetting that point. That actually, these funny guys in the military court-martial, they're actually not lawyers. You know, all along with Museveni's so-called militarization, professionalism, his nyong and everything, whatever army thing. No, I genuinely didn't know that these guys are not necessarily lawyers. So no wonder.
It's like letting commanders be doctors.
Indeed. So no wonder the other day, I saw one of these clips that did Lukwago plus this other guy is teaching this other guy. So this rather generously gifted, NRA guy in size, was trying to respond to Lukwago. And the guy literally stammered. I said, the last time I saw somebody struggling with this was when I was in okay, not really my P5, when I was a class monitor.
Wow. That's quite low.
P5.
Sorry, I have a bad cough. So we've talked about a lot, so much learning, so much reflection. But also, I think we understand what the problem really is, where the problem is, how it is manifesting. And this not only applies to the judiciary, like we've agreed, it's happening everywhere in almost every sector. But when we come back to the question of whether the judiciary is trying hard enough or not, with all these challenges we've highlighted and identified, how then does the judiciary navigate these problems and actually re-emerge and reclaim its rightful place in our society? We have to agree that these are not sober times. The Ugandan society as it is not sober anymore. And ultimately, we are looking at the judiciary to be that voice of sobriety. How can it reclaim its position and its voice and shape the future of this country?
Can I start with that, actually? It's just interesting because we generally think about this. And as I said, I've just been saying earlier, this is my life. I live this process. I'm not saying none of us do, but I'm speaking as myself. This is my life. And this is something, and so sometimes you wonder, is it you? Miriam, I do not know if you're not being unfair to the judiciary with that question, because both Robert and Miriam already said it. It's the judiciary is literally a mirror of the entirety of the system. Look at the educational system. Look at the health system. Look at the transportation system. Look at the agricultural sector. The other day I was in Mainagongera and I had to get a vet and to pay quite hugely just to sort out my one little cow. But another vet had already passed by, just a few weeks earlier. And then I looked through and as I said, under a UPC government in which I was alive and over 18, veterinary officers are in every sub-county, public servants. Now, the amount of money that I paid is not so much. Just the other day, this week. But in the entirety of my we call it triangular line within my zone, my home area, you know, except for the Jandijamwas plus a few other 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5 families, maybe 4 families. There are not many people who could afford that money to call a vet and sort out a cow. And I was saying, I do this every so often. So at what stage do I look 3 years later, 2 years later, so now I also have a Boston bull that I sell, and then do I remember that I sell possibly this was an ordinary bull that I sell off at 1.3 million shillings, and then I remember that I actually spent 300,000 shillings treating it. So what exactly is it? And you know, and people think it's business as usual. And including, as I was chatting with a fantastic young vet lady, you know, she herself has no clue. She didn't actually know that her presence was a matter of formality. Of course, I really didn't push on a particular corner, you know. But likewise, the entirety of the people in Agongara have no clue that that is actually a deficit onto them. I want to tell you that yesterday, Thursday, I was talking to a young man, fantastic guy in Atim in Karamoja, and we were discussing the same thing about something to do with cows. But then you suddenly realize people genuinely don't know what really ordinarily belong to them. So, having said that, basically mainly in the agricultural sector, come then to the, as I said, education. I think somebody was talking about how many of these poor guys, all of them vote NRA, and they do so absolutely blindly. When I was getting into my car in West Nile, a young boy asked the usual thing, tried to ask about this thing that I should give them some money. And actually the context in which he was saying was not about give us money because you're a politician. He was actually begging for money, kind of stuff. So I got out of my car and there was other people, so I started talking to them. And somebody was saying, talk to them, talk to them. Actually that audience was a different audience from this audience that wants to get money from people in public schools or politicians, but actually genuinely innocent, desperate community. I want to return there with some bits of ideas. Point is, these guys genuinely do not know. Now, the judiciary. Judith, in UPC, a High Court ruling in January 20, I think June 2015, was appealed, and the Court of Appeal the appeal ran from that time to September to July 2020. It took myself writing an opinion piece on the Monitor to preempt the Court of Appeal response, and the Court of Appeal made a fantastic ruling. That ruling has never been respected. You know, that ordered for fresh elections, which I took part, for which I won, because that's how I am actually technically the president of the party, but I don't want to call myself that because I've not been declared either by the competent court, in this case, by a competent internal electoral commission of the party. You know, but you know, I went to court, merely an average court thing. March 2021, for a judicial review, it should take 6 months. I think this is what my colleagues were sort of part joking about my challenge. But I think I should use it as an example to tell you. So, on the one hand, is it the judicial officer's responsibility or is it a system? So a judicial review that should take 6 months is now taking nearly 4 years. Do these guys want me to go to the bush? You know? Now, but let me tell you, and I've said it on the record on camera, I visited the principal judge, since we're discussing this, I visited the principal judge informally, not to complain. The principal judge told me that, oh, the judge holding your case is actually not a very busy guy. And he called the guy in my presence. The matter still took another 1 year. And by then, until now, it has not been resolved. Meaning, senior judicial officers know about this mess. Is it about resources? No. There is an apparent cadreship, an apparent organized system within these institutions. I think, as Miriam was saying, that the level of state capture is that we are not going to do anything to expect change amongst the judiciary and judicial officers in as long as Mr. Museveni continues to be the one still to appoint these people. And I want to say this quickly. I also know that the recent, and maybe I should pronounce myself on this, there was a recent application to Miriam for judges, you know. And apparently some of these things, even ordinary application for judges, however perfect, a decent and accomplished lawyer you were, you will need to have a recommendation from somebody that shows that you're sort of NRA-ish kind of stuff in order to get through. A particular individual had an IT hatch, you know, made a submission, And today, there was no response from them. So the judiciary is as much under capture. Most of the key people in these institutions know what is going on. The answer to you is what I said at the moment. I mean, that we need to bang the table. Now, who are the people who bang the table? Maybe Semakade plus a few people. Maybe you, Judith, plus a few people in your trade. Maybe a few academia. But some Ugandans need to bang the table
All of us.
and persuade a critical number of Ugandans that we need to bang the table and that the status quo is not sustainable. It will not be sustainable in our interest and certainly not in the interest of our children. That's really what has to be. That book, Betraying the City, those days when we could read them, I don't know whether in average high secondary school would have them these days. I know Miriam likes that quote, that it is like that thing called the madness of an entire nation. When it strikes,
Yeah, when it disrupts the
it is sufficient to
the
suggest
salt and the mind.
that some solitary mind is sick. No, it's a national madness.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we demand from the judiciary, number one, is that they should do their work. This issue of backlog of cases is an indictment to that department. How can a matter of national interest like this one of the court martial take 3 years when it would have been given agency like these presidential elections and what have you, judgments, and the people settle? We know when, if it is illegal, people go and die from there. If it was illegal, we would now know that they are doing it illegally. But now the Owinyindolo decision has left people in a balance. And I think my very good friend Owin has had a lot of challenges. And that's why when you are conflicted, sometimes you don't need to go into the things. I think the Chief Justice went in this post when he was conflicted on many cases, because you know he had served in government as an executive, as a minister. He had been a personal lawyer to the president and many things. So people have not seen that independence in him. When he was at the Court of Appeal, you remember what went through. And so many others. Of course, we don't want to personalize this matter. But the citizenry has to determine where to reach. I normally tell people that if you fear blood, leave meat alone. If you fear to split blood, become a vegetarian. So if we want to suffer, let's keep quiet. For example, when we had these young men of Noop, very many of them, 30-something, in court martial and an unknown place, how come we did not see a list of lawyers coming to say that they are going to stand? It was this poor lady of Kampala driving left and center. The lady would drive from Masaka on Sigirinya. She drives to go to Machindie. There is a day even feared she was going to die. She was being chased by military vehicles because they wanted to kidnap some of the people who had been released. And the lady was driving like a rally driver. How come when it is Vesige, there are 50 lawyers who are ready to come and defend? And I must tell you that the court martial is scared, is terribly scared, because 50 lawyers led by Martha Karua, who was a former
Chief Supreme
Deputy Attorney General of Kenya, they are scared. So if we had these cases, like you remember recently when Nawangwe made some stupid pronouncements and suspended students for demonstrating that they are hungry. And Semakade said we have put in place 30 lawyers. The next day, he removed the suspensions.
Yeah.
So I think if lawyers came up and said we are not going to court, if we are being subjected to these bogus things at Machindi, the powers that be would listen to them and say, we are not going to sacrifice Fede. like we normally do. Not a strike, but just a sit down for a week, and they say if these matters in the court are not being handled legally, we shall not appear there. We are not going there. There will be a case. Politicians, if all politicians, I used to see people demonstrate. What has happened? Why don't we demonstrate against these wrong things so that we put pressure on court? For example, we go at the Supreme Court, they will beat a few of you and arrest some, but there will be an answer so that Owinyi can call his colleagues and they sit and determine this matter
Even the parliament.
and make themselves. For example, now just Martha Karua getting a certificate, a license to practice has become a hide and seek thing. People are not going to office because they don't want to sign that thing, because they are supposed to sign it. They have no choice. Then for us, the public, I think for us, the public, our forces are on the vote. And especially people in Kampala who speak English, we need to know that we are the ones who put these people here. If we decide, I looked at the people who had not voted last time and the one who voted. If we all went and voted, we would have changed things. If we could go and say this time we want change, and we go and vote these people and tell them that the reason why we are voting you out, the reason why we are voting this one out and this one out and this one out, especially the topmost, is because you have failed to put judges. The next president will be careful. But where they know that majority of us don't care, so long as we get salary, and NRM is very clever, they make sure that salaries for public servants are paid by 25th. They make sure that if there is an increment, is increment of these big people in offices. And therefore, we say, what is the problem? I think let's go on like this. Why do you want commotion? We are very comfortable. If, for example, somebody can sabotage and public servants take 5 months without getting salary like other people do in local government, in police, and many other places, I think we shall rise up. So we need some wake-up call. We need in churches, you go to these churches where people are praying for dictators, and you chase them out of the church. And you chase them out of the church and beat up the pastor, show that miracles don't work. And people will rise up. Otherwise, people are doing funny things here when we are breeding a bad country for our children.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Miriam?
Thank you for bringing out that. I think our advocacy has died. We can't blame the judiciary alone for not doing enough. What are we doing as citizens? Because power belongs to us. All power to hold everybody accountable, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. I was wondering, like you said, when NUP members were arrested, the political mobilizers were kidnapped, arrested after being tortured, and even taken, incarcerated in unknown places for so many days and then produced in that kangaroo court. I was wondering why other political party members like Joseph here at the UPC, we didn't see FDC coming up. We didn't see NRM party members coming up at court to really advocate for their release or their justice. Like it was as more as if NUP, as if they were condemning their colleagues, like, oh, it's you die on your own, we are also here, we don't want to be part of your pride. And it brings me to, again, another historical lesson. I'm thinking about South Africa during the ANC struggle. When political prisoners, when these activists, the Nelson Mandela and colleagues, would be arrested, everybody, all citizens, all people, the churches, everybody would come up and stand at the court and say, we want justice. And if people really come out to push, however much the regime is oppressive, when people overpower it with their advocacy, with their activism and the calls for freedom, there is no way that the government is going to stay unmoved and keep holding those people without trial. because that pressure, like the power belongs to the people, but how do we hold this power and how do we apply it to make sure that we get the services and the justice that we deserve? And that really goes back to, I don't know what is happening to Ugandan advocacy. You talked about you no longer see demonstrations, you no longer see, even civil societies just lukewarm. We don't see academia, we don't see church leaders coming up. Even Gen Zs, we had thought that we are seeing new blood, taking up the struggle for political justice and freedom. And
they are going to Gulu to pick money.
Yeah, and they just came up and, hey, Gen Zs, what happened? Where are you? We are waiting for you. They are laughing at me. How did you disappear like overnight like that? And it's the young people, like Franz Fanon said, every generation has its cause, and they either live up to it or they betray it. And I think the young people in Uganda who compose the majority, they are more than 70%. You are doing a disservice to Uganda, but this country belongs to you. For us, we are aging, and very soon we are retiring. What type of a country are you going to live in if you don't start fighting for it right now?
Thank you, Miriam.
You know, I was just telling Miriam and a fantastic friend of ours I met before we came on air from another major political organization. I don't want to give them free advert on this occasion. I've already given them enough. Only UPC is the future. No, but the fantastic political parties in this country. My young brother, my good brother, Mugisha Muta, I think is older than me. He's A&T, you know, he's a decent guy with a reasonably decently young political organization. I hope that he and his members continue to learn the UPC way so that we join in critical thinking and be able to build broad alternative polity. But yes, my good friends in FDC, NUP and others, NUP, I give them a free advert all the time, but I've really never had NUP praise Ochieno, praise UPC. So I must complain about it. But look, so I was saying to this guy, because this is important, and it's part of what my two colleagues are saying. Judith, there is political illiteracy where some people in certain political organizations think immediately they mention Milton Obote constructively, Uganda will sink into their disadvantage, you know? And that so long as they say NUP really mobilized Uganda and they nearly won Busoga, you know? That, you know, they'll go home and their wives will not give them a proper hug, kind of stuff. It's actually generally very irritating, but that is the level of polity that we've got, and also the absence of leadership. But I was telling this young guy from A&T that amongst the many things that the young camera persons here, by the way, the camera persons on this program, if you guys don't know, civil society is driven by young people, and so I'm always very delighted to be there. So they're very good guys, by the way, they're very deep, but because they're in the background, you will not be able to see them. So one of these days, I think we should have a program in which you have all these guys down here. Whoever will be controlling the volume and with the sounds, we don't know who we are. So the cameras, you can chime in a bit. Look, I was telling the guy that at 24, I had already gone to exile. And at 24, I had already had sufficient capacity to critique the emptiness of this NRA regime and to think my future and have a position, an individual position and also a collective position. So this is what Miriam is saying. Young Ugandans genuinely need to wake up and begin to ask themselves questions on why sometimes some of us find our ways to be here to have this conversation. You know, we don't come here to lament, we come here to seek to wake you guys up. A Kenyan friend, fantastic, beautiful lady, a mother of a 12-year-old, seated in my car. In fact, one time they sort of dropped me on this program as they came to visit. And she told me that, Joseph, do you want me to donate him? And the son was sitting behind. That the Kenyans could. So this is official. Ugandan Gen Z, in this breaking news, a Kenyan mother from a rich part of Mount Kenya, I'm saying rich because she told me in that program that her son attends universal primary education in Kenya. And she told me that all that she has to do is to get uniform. And everything is done for. Why I said that is the richest part of the richest part of Kenya, you know? And she's an upper middle class Kenyan wife who was educated here. So she's got it all. But her child attends a Kenyan universal primary education school. So she does not have to take a child to an average private school. And she says all she doesn't pay is
School uniform.
School uniform. So young Ugandans, wake up this NRUP thing. And you Ugandan elite who want to compete, particularly you, the Ugandan elite women, you're beautiful people. But you want to compete that, you need to prove that your child attends the other private school, and you know the popularity of it has got to be based on how much fees is paid for, kind of stuff. But back to the young Gen Z's Uganda. So she said, Joseph, I can donate him for you, for you guys, to move your Gen Z guys. Because ours, they may not have achieved it. She said, we are genuinely proud. And this is a woman in, I think so like early 40s, I mean late 30s, early 40s. She's genuinely proud that her child, son, and people younger than her have pushed Kenya, and they're pushing Kenya ahead. So that's a really challenge to Ugandan youth today. But then number two, the challenge to us, the political class. Oh no, it's big. Miriam, the biggest, most urgent thing in this country is absence of leadership. Museveni has provided perfect leadership for Anglo-American imperialism. He's a perfect Nyampala, you know, to sell Uganda in the sub-region. So that has provided leadership for it.
His absence of leadership is challenging.
And he's done it for himself and his family. But in terms of national leadership, political leadership, holistic leadership in this country, it is massively, urgently lacking. And one, so therefore, gets worse, that in alternative to Museveni, an alternative leadership, which naturally will then be an oppositionist leadership, is absent. Is absent, and for that reason, yes, it's true, therefore, that is it a Chagulani issue? No. Is it a Kisumu issue? Is it a Kizza Besigye issue? No. I've argued it variously. I have said, and I don't want to say too much because actually they watch, that some of these things they know is why they suppress certain kind of leadership in the democratic position, because they know that some of those people have got capacity. We need people who then be able to galvanize and bring us around particular issues. I've argued this, and I can say it again openly. That look, one of the things we needed, Mabati, when Mabati happened, if there was genuine organized political leadership, it would have galvanized a national consensus that would have compelled half people from NRA saying, we leave that thing, we don't and then brought people together. That is what we require. So politically, is it political elitism for which therefore Besigye is much more acceptable, much more formidable, or is it, Miriam, it's very important point you guys raise, that a successful state presentation of NUP, as a matter for NUP leaders and their strategists, to also present this organization as these rather crude, rowdy, marudi, radical, stone-throwing kids of town. There they go again, and leave it with them. It's important that whatever happens, leadership emerges that sees beyond that, sees beyond whatever is happening around Kizza Besigye, and focus on the fundamentals around the institutions. And that's why I told this program, I think both of us with Dr. Ojambo, we said the other week that look, it does not matter whether Kizza Besigye indeed committed these offenses. It is basically the manner in which he was being handled. So no, leadership is urgent, in political parties is urgent. For me, I don't want to pretend that I'm being defensive. Unfortunately, my office, for the moment, is in my car. My office is in my living room, and my office is in another private room, and my office is in my phone, because my office has been usurped by the judiciary and by the state. In the event that I was in Uganda House, you would really see the difference. But regardless, I don't even think I myself am doing enough to be able to bring our colleagues together so that be able to focus that when these things happen to every average Ugandan, it is about the average Ugandan, regardless of their political class.
Thank you.
Judith, let me just say a sentence.
Just a sentence, and then you also conclude.
On the thing of leadership. In fact, in my own prediction, it's going to be worse. Because the history of this country is that leaders have been trained in schools and in colleges. When you see our MPs, our LC5s, they are people who started their politics at college, at the university. In Uganda now, you cannot hold a successful guild election in Makerere University It is not even allowed that you campaign.
Yeah.
They only now have to send SMSs and WhatsApp, and somebody is elected online. Sometimes they even elect who they don't know. In other universities, I don't want to mention them, they have even failed to organize an election, a guild election. For example, Ojambo University right now does not have a guild president.
No, they don't.
Yeah, the National Students Council used to be another avenue for leadership. It has been hijacked by Chadondo Plot 10. That now they are the ones who organize everything, they are the ones who bring candidates, and therefore they end up with the what I call with the GMO leaders, genetically modified leaders. We don't have the Maos, the Mayombos who got out of university, the Galogithos, although Galogitho is languishing in the village now, and many others. So that is a very big area. Go in primary school. Prefects now are buying. They become head prefects because of distributing sweets. Where do they learn from? NRM. NRM business of buying votes. And so many others. So we need to go back to the drawing board. There is no way you are going to get leaders who matter up there without these systems that allow them. LOC would have been another training place to elect leaders. And now we cannot elect in local areas. We can't elect even just lining behind people. We can't. So how do you expect that any leader? And those who come up to become leaders, you are an object of jail and police and these things. So you find the situation is very hard. I don't know. I don't know whether we just need to come up and we first create a stateless Uganda, then again we create another state. I don't know. But under normal circumstances, the other place was church. Church was a very good place to train leaders. Now in church, they have become so political that now they want also to inherit. A son of a reverend should also become a reverend, and like that, and like that, and like that.
Robert, I need you to wind up.
It is really funny. So me, I think when we go back to the judiciary, I think this judiciary thing affects all of us. Going to a court or prison is like going to a hospital. Everybody is a person who, anytime you can go to a hospital. And I really feel that anytime I can be a product of this, I mean a suspect at this court martial. And for me, as it is now, it would be very difficult for me to defend myself there. And if I cannot defend myself, therefore, many Ugandans cannot defend themselves, and it is not a good thing. We need to abandon it, go back to civil way of handling things. After all, they say that our education levels have increased. Education creates civility. Why do people still want to handle things in the bush way? Them Sevenis can go back to the bush and handle their things there. They need to leave us to handle our things in civility. But this will not come on a silver platter. We need to shout. We need to bang tables, to use Semakadezi language. We need to demand for these things. And that's why some of us come here to speak to you so that we can raise. We don't have any problem with anybody. We only have problems with how they do their things.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Robert Ojambo. Miriam, could I just have your parting shots and then we'll move to Joseph?
Just to add on what he said, I think the future of Uganda, if we continue like this, as far as leadership is concerned, it's very bleak, it's not promising, yet we can do better. We have had educated people. So far, even though the country economically is not doing well, at least we have access to information. And on average, the literacy levels have improved. So why has our leadership levels really degenerated into something you can't understand? And I also want to call upon the young people again, not really so young, but these people who are useful and who are informed, who are educated. You will not have, you might think you are doing well, you have a job, you have this and that, but if the politics are messed up, then the country would as well be messed up for you. You won't have anywhere to have a family, you won't have anywhere to educate your children from. So it's your duty to really clean up, and cleaning up really starts from each of us. Let's hold each other accountable. If you have a judge at home, challenge them really to uphold justice. And as for the judiciary, I can't emphasize it anymore. I think we need to look at that constitutional provision which separates the judiciary from the executive. The judiciary needs to be more independent. Even their enumeration, everything, they need to be independent on how they are vetted into power, how they are, they shouldn't be appointed by the executive, because that already compromises their independence from the word go. But again, it's all of, even though they are compromised and in a state they are, I think they can still dispense justice if they wanted. So there is that will. Where is the will to uphold the rule of law that you professed, that you studied to uphold and took the oath to do? It's like, Dr. Ojambo said that he can't get justice today if we are to be presented in court for anything, because it's about the money. Do you have the money to buy the judge? Do you have the money to buy the attorney? Do you have the money to buy even the police officer who's going to take you? So everything, the corruption has eaten up our society to that extent. Even the judiciary, the officers who are compromised, like the officers, quote unquote, they are just there because of the peanuts they get thrown at by the government. They are waiting for maybe the envelopes and that's why they compromise the law and justice, because they think that maybe the powers that be might give them something, or even appoint them to other positions which can give them more enumeration. So the corruption, the lack of will, and even as the compliances of the whole population, we can't blame the judicial alone. They don't exist in space. It's the whole thing, and it's high time we all wake up and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Joseph, let's hear from you finally.
Miriam and Robert and Judith, the two trades in which professionals that sign and swear oaths are medicine to protect lives, and lawyers to uphold the law and to dispense justice. Milton Obote wrote to Tony Blair when we were campaigning for return to multipartyism in a letter that I handed delivered to Downing Street. And one of those big things was this thing that there are no half measures on democracy. Always remember that. And it was challenging the British that we can't have quarter in Uganda, we have quarter, and we apply it in Congo, and then we're saying something else in Zimbabwe. You know, it has so lawyers better listen, and Ugandans better listen and watch. So we really can't play with these things, and this is upon what old man Milton again would call upon conscience. The last elected president of UPC was Olaro Tuni in 2010. So to date, we do not have an elected president. Doesn't say I'm technically the elected person, but without a mandate. Now, what do you expect from this one, an independent political party? You know, so that's how bad it is. And I'm using UPC from an authoritative perspective. Then you can think about other political parties. But ours is directly as a result of interferences by both the state, and in this case, either the incompetence or omission by the judicial system. As it happens, following the Court of Appeal ruling and very definitive later Supreme Court ruling last year, the Electoral Commission recognizes a person whom the Supreme Court of Appeal has ruled that is not president. You know, so the judiciary has really to look inward. And like Miriam saying, if you're a lawyer and if you're related to a judge and to lawyers and things like that, the former member of parliament met with me at a radio program in Kampala, and he told me that, no, Joseph, you know, I was actually a doctor, actually, said, Joseph is a doctor. No, Joseph, you know, whenever I go home, you know, my children, and he's got a daughter who's also a medical student at the time, will tell me that, but Dad, NRM of course, you know, Dad, why do you guys do these things? He was telling my children that Dad would come from, why do you do it? So he told me that we struggle with these things, but you know, we have to manage. No, I think you're doing injustice. If even your children see this, don't forget, for me, Ochieno, whatever happens, one of the reasons why I went to court, and I'm contextualizing, is because I have a report to give to Jesus in heaven, But I also have a complete report to give to Milton Body, for whom I'm the permanent spokesperson. I have to make sure that it's systematic, it is clear and available. But lest you forget, you know, whatever anybody thinks they're doing to Ochieno, it will catch up with you, number one. And number two, in 20 years' time, whatever happens in this republic, you know, whatever happens, you know, scholars and academicians, at the time when people will be studying UPC, studying ANT, they must be able to go through it systematically, and whenever and so long as it happens under my watch, I'll challenge it. And that's why for me, Miriam, we do not come here because of UPC. For me, any Ugandan youth, any Ugandan citizen, any Ugandan life is a life. Because for us, we are trained and committed ourselves to say we will do each and everything for God and my country. And I hope with that, it will invoke some Ugandan to begin doing it the right way.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Joseph Ochieno, Miriam Kyomugasho, and Dr. Robert Ojambo for your insights. It's been quite a powerful conversation and good points for reflection. Of course, we've been talking about the illegal military court trials of civilians, and we've been wondering whether the judiciary is fighting hard enough. This is the Citizens Chat Show on Civic Space TV, and this brings us to the end of today's edition. My name is Judith Atim. See you next time. Bye for now.